Not going to get that championship back by shaking hands, being best friends with the champion. No, I slapped him right in his stupid face. I slid out of the ring, and I let him know my intentions from that point.
He calls me down to the ringside, and we're starting to chat. He's just saying how I'm doing, all that. And then at the very end, he's like, "Hey, you got a match?" I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" He's like, "Yeah, you're gonna have a match." I was like, "That's not normal. Like, why?" And he's like, "You'll be fine. You're gonna do good. You're gonna wrestle Aleister Black. It's gonna be great." I was like, "All right, cool, yeah."
And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, for frequency's sake tag team champions of the world, the Wizard CZ, and never wrong, Nick Bull.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Card Subject to Change podcast, episode 109, Behind the Lens. We've got a very special guest we'll get to here in a second, but we want to thank you for joining us here tonight. I know it's a busy time with spring schedules, spring sports. As we record this, it's Selection Sunday, March Madness, and we're happy you selected us. You're along here for the ride, whether you're listening live or listening on a rebroadcast of this. We are so happy you're here, and we're so happy because we've got, well, the Wizard's here, of course. Obviously, we got to be happy that the Wizard's here.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be happy.
Well,
but
I mean, we got to be happy. He's here. You're here, man. You're one half of the tag team champs of the network. We got to defend these belts, and we're defending them here. And we've got a great guest this week. We've been really excited to get this guy on. It's been about a month or two in the works, but we finally got him. You can catch him most of the time ringside at your favorite local indie show. You can also catch his work on Facebook under the Facebook page Tag Team Photography. We are talking with the head of Tag Team Photography, none other than Clint Dye. Clint, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. It was a busy day of working outside, but it's been a good day.
Yes, sometimes that the wrestling real life balance has to kick in at some point, right? You got to get stuff done around the house.
Yeah, it's always JT Energy, and I have joked about this before. When there's shows on like a Saturday and then nothing brings you back down to reality when Sunday hits and you got housework and stuff like that, and then Monday you're back to your regular work, and it just kind of slowly brings you back down from what you did the night before. So
I hear you. You can catch Clint ringside. Clint has got we're glad we got Clint here. He has got a wonderful perspective on things as he watches most wrestling shows that we're at through a little screen about like this as he's taking pictures. So before we get into the picture taking and talk about Clint's love and whatnot, I want to ask Clint the first question I ask every guest here that comes on the show. I mean, it's a spoiler alert. Every show starts off the same. So if you're just tuning in, you know what question I'm going to ask. And Clint, what is it for you with wrestling that got you hooked? Why pro wrestling? Why do you like pro wrestling? What's kept you coming back? What's kept you in it? What got you hooked from the get-go?
When I was a kid, first show I ever went to was in Kemper Arena down in Kansas City because I grew up in Kansas City.
Cool.
I got to see Hulk Hogan and the Big Boss Man in the main event, and just something that my dad kind of introduced me to, and I've just grown to love it over all the years. And my fandom is just continuously grown and grown. And during the Monday Night Wars, I was there flipping channels from TNT to USA, back and forth, calling my best friend, saying, "Oh, did you see him? Did you see him?" You know, and it just grows over time. And then in college, I still was a fan. I didn't watch it as much. I was a little busy doing the college things that kind of keep you from watching wrestling as much, partying and having fun and all that. But I still paid attention here and there, and then got out of college and still liked it and loved it from the very beginning, from the start of it. And now that my kids have all gotten into it as well. You see them at the shows with me, and they all love it, including my daughter, and they just have just the best time in the world at these shows. My wife gives me a hard time. She's not a huge fan of pro wrestling, never has been, but she kind of puts up with my love. She would put it in her vows that she puts up with my obsession with wrestling. So it's always been there, and then we moved up here and found a freaking mecca of pro wrestling in Iowa with all the promotions here. So it kind of worked out for this big wrestling fan.
Absolutely. Clint, you were talking about the Monday Night Wars. That was my high school years. Mm-hmm. I'm an era of the Monday Night Wars, but I wasn't a channel clicker. I would watch Monday Night Raw.
Yep.
And then I would watch the replay, which happened immediately after of
Mhm.
WCW of Nitro.
Yep.
I got to ask you, though, were you a Nitro guy or were you a Raw guy?
What's funny is I was a Raw guy, and I remember there were two guys who were in my older sister's grade, and we were in art class together, and they were always just bashing WWE. And like, I didn't hate either promotion. I enjoyed both, you know.
Sure.
But I leaned more towards the WWF at the time just because it was always there, you know, and WCW was kind of this different thing for me. Like I'd seen WCW in magazines and WCW Saturday Night. And then when they started doing Nitro, I don't think I really paid attention much to Nitro until the NWO kind of started. And that kind of got me to flip over, which I'm sure a lot of people, when the NWO started gaining steam, really got them watching both. And so when that started, I was a channel flipper like crazy, you know, and calling my best friend Lucas, and he was there watching it too. I used to always get a large pepperoni pizza, hot stuff pizza. That's a reference to a pizza that I don't even think is around anymore, but that was my Monday routine, was having pizza and watching wrestling. So
I remember hot stuff pizza, and I don't think it's around anymore. Great reference from the 90s, dude. That is awesome.
Hot stuff pizza was great.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Clint, you talked about the mecca of wrestling we have here in Iowa, and I'm glad you said that word, because we really do. Iowa really has this untapped backyard of wrestling promotions, not backyard indie wrestling, not backyard wrestling, but in Iowa, you walk out your backyard here, there's all these different promotions you can go to on any given weekend. Talk about the organizations that are out there that are just so easy to get to within a couple hour drive that you can go see. There's more out there besides just SCW Pro, which is how I met you and seen your work through.
Zach Takis and I have talked about this a lot. He does the Shotgun Wrestling Radio Show.
Yep.
He had mentioned to me that through, I think, March through April, every weekend there's a show in Iowa somewhere.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, just to think crazy. That many promotions now. It's almost became too flooded with promotions, but everyone's doing their own thing. For the most part, everyone kind of has their territory. You know, the territory days, it's alive and well. You know, you see promotions running in the Quad Cities. You see it's everywhere. And SCW, obviously, you guys know me from there for mostly. CEW is kind of where I started. Central Empire Wrestling is where it all kind of began for me.
Austin Bayless has been on the show, friend of the show. Yep.
Yeah, and Austin, he kind of brought me into it. And it's funny how it all started. We moved up here to Oskaloosa in 2018, December of 2018, and I saw a poster at one of the Casey's here for Central Empire Wrestling shows, their 10-year anniversary show. And at the time, I was kind of working for the newspaper in New Sharon and Oskaloosa a little bit. And Storm Thomas used to play football at William Penn. And so the newspaper asked me if I could do an article on Storm, because it was supposed to be his final match as he was moving down to Florida. And so I was already going to be interviewing him for the newspaper. And so I reached out to Austin after he personally brought me the tickets one day. And I asked him if I could bring my camera, because I was planning to come to the show and I was going to interview Storm. And he's like, yeah, go for it. Then the Thursday before the show, he reaches out, and his photographer that he had planned couldn't make it. And he's like, well, you're going to bring your camera. He's like, do you want to shoot the show ringside? And I'm like, hell yes, I do. Like, this wrestling was like the dream come true, you know? And so my son, Emmett, he's 12 years old, he's been with me from the very beginning at all the shows. He was sitting front row and I was shooting ringside. And then from Austin, he kind of introduced me to Troy Peterson with Impact Pro Wrestling. And I shot one of their shows later in the year, and I've done theirs, you know, a lot of theirs since then. And we've done the Hall of Fame show in Waterloo for them. And JT Energy was my connection to SCW Pro, because I knew JT from CEW at the time, and he had told me that he was wrestling for SCW, and I'd never heard of them before. And so my son Emmett and I went to one of their shows at Beer Stube, and it was one of their outside patio shows. Sure. And I just took pictures from the fan perspective, because they already had a photographer and I wasn't going to get in his way. And just over time, they invited me back to shoot their shows, and I took pictures ringside, and I've been doing that for almost 4 years now. And then after SCW Pro, Madhouse and Absolute Pro Wrestling both got started. And what was cool about being there with them is I was there from the very beginning with their shows. You know, the first show, I was at each one of their first shows, and I've been to their shows since then. I've missed a couple Madhouse because they've had conflicting schedules at times, which doesn't happen often, a lot, but it does ever so often. So, you gotta kind of schedule it where you're going to one night and then the other one the next night. So being there for the beginning of those was really cool to see how it all started, see what went through it. I write for a wrestling website called Pro Wrestling Post, and I interviewed Malice, I interviewed Jason Prentice, I interviewed Shank, I interviewed Luke Raven before they got going. So it was kind of like hey, this is coming. These promotions are coming. And then since then, I've had great relationships with all those guys. They all love my kids, know all the promoters. They let my kids come to the shows. The wrestlers know the kids now, which has been kind of cool because I've been able to avoid that heartbreaking conversation where you have to tell them, hey, it's not as real as you think it is. Like it's real, but it's scripted and everything like that. Them being at the shows, we're there probably an hour before the doors open. So they get to see the ring being put together. They get to see the ring getting taken down after the shows. They see the wrestlers coming in when they're not in their wrestling character mode. So having that made it a little easier, especially for my son Emmett, who's the diehard of all of my kids. I didn't have to break his heart so much, where he kind of started putting it all together like, oh, maybe it's not as real as I thought, but it kind of like movies, I can still love it. And even though my boys have become smart fans for being as young as they are, when they're at the shows, they get sucked in just like watching WWE. Like 2 weeks ago at the CEW show, when everything went down in the main event and Rory Fox and company, took down JT Energy's 4-year reign and formed their own little faction. I can always tell if something works that a promotion's doing by my son Emmett's reactions. And he was stunned. He knows how it all works at this point in time, but he still was so emotionally invested that it was a cool moment to see that. So,
and that's the magic of pro wrestling right there. I want to go back to something you said a little earlier. You're booked all over the state of Iowa to take pictures ringside. When you do have a conflict and there's 2 shows going on the same, what's the deciding factor as to where you go?
Well, a lot of times last year, for a specific instance, Madhouse had a show in November, as did APW. They both had a show on the same night. They had them in October too. So in October, I went to the Madhouse show because it was a little closer to home than APW was. Then I flipped it, and Madhouse was going to be in Minnesota, which I'm going to that show this year. I will not miss that one. And APW was closer to home. So that's how I kind of pick between them. That'll determine a lot of it, is the distance that I have to take the kids. That's a big determining factor. I don't really go by any favorites. I love all the promotions that I shoot for pretty equally. And it's usually just kind of depends on when the next show is that I'll be able to be at for the promotion that I'm missing out on, and then how far of a drive it is too.
Heather Woods chiming in. You were talking about CEW. Rory Fox, hashtag not my champion.
You're listening to the Card Subject to Change podcast. We are powered by Low Pies Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. We have special guest photographer Clint Dye on. And Clint, you kind of talked about the infancy stages when Austin Bayless gave you a chance to come to a show and start shooting. Talk about the birth of tag team photography. When did you know, hey, when did you turn your love into taking pictures into, hey, this is something that I could really run with? When did tag team photography really take off running, I guess?
Well, tag team photography started long before we moved up here.
Okay.
I've been shooting high school football for almost 2 decades now.
Okay.
I worked for a newspaper down in Missouri, my hometown. I got to give a shout out to my good guy, Brett Atkinson, who runs the newspaper down there. Him and I, we prided ourselves on the football coverage we gave to 3 local high schools, and we would put our coverage up against any other small town newspaper in the country. Probably. We've won awards for our articles we've written, our pictures we've taken. We've done a really good job with it. And then on the flip side of that, my wife and I have taken pictures at weddings before. We did my brother-in-law's wedding. I've done a few of my high school classmates' weddings that we've done down there. And my wife does photography too, but she does more of like family pictures and senior pictures and youth sports for, the youth sports, the graphics that you get with youth sports pictures and stuff like that.
The moms with the buttons on their purses.
Exactly. She does a lot of that stuff, and she's great at it. She kicks a lot of ass at that. And so when we came up with this, we're like, well, let's just call it tag team photography. I jokingly said that, wrestling background and having the love of wrestling. And she went with it and she came up with our logo and everything. And then when we got up here, I just happened to fall in this area of pro wrestling that's just been amazing to be a part of. And I already had the name of the photography company to go with what I'm doing with pro wrestling. My wife likes to joke whenever she posts something on the Facebook page that doesn't happen a whole lot when we do like team pictures and things like that. She likes to mention we do more than just football and pro wrestling. So more towards that, but we do offer that quite a bit more than that. We're doing my niece's wedding in December. We're going to take pictures at it. And I did a good friend of mine from high school's wedding 2 years ago down in Missouri. So tag team photography started long before I started doing the pro wrestling stuff.
So, Clint, I want to ask a question that I ask a lot of people every once in a while. I can remember back in my ring announcing days when there was one night that I can only describe as magic.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you were feeling it while you were ringside. Maybe you didn't quite catch that feeling until you were looking at the photographs that you took after. But can you think of a time in recent memory where the whole night was just magic?
I could probably name one for each promotion. I got to give one to each one.
Sure.
Right.
For Central Empire Wrestling, it was Bridge City Slam last year. I've been a part of 4 of the 5. I moved up here after Bridge City Slam 1, so I missed out on the very first one, but I've been around every one since. With CEW, I'm a little more involved than just taking pictures. I help with Austin with a lot of other things. I recommend bringing in talent sometimes, and he listens to me a lot of the times. Like recently, we brought in Eric Esnight and Malik Champion and Augustus Draven to CEW. That was all kind of me in Austin's ear, like, hey, let's bring these guys in. They bring a lot to the table. Let's see what they can do here. And they all killed it 2 weeks ago. But
Sure.
Back to Bridge City Slam last year, it felt different than the ones that I'd been at before because we didn't have any really big former WWE or anybody like that actually wrestling on the card. There were people there. Kurt Angle was there. That's a big deal. He was there. There was quite a few other big names there, but none were actually wrestling. And it just felt like everyone that was on the card, every of the local talent that was there had an extra gear in them that night that they were going to go out and it was just going to be banger after banger. And it turned out great. And one thing that I really like to reference back to that was the Damian St. Jared Thumb match. That was a match that Austin and I had talked about. It was one that I was really pushing him to give them the opportunity to shine. And they went out and just killed it. A lot of people said that was match of the night. It was just a great, hard-hitting match. And one of the things I remember most is right before they were about to make their entrances, I stepped back behind the curtain and I start slapping both of them on the chest, trying to get them hyped up even more. And Damian saying afterwards, we were talking about it later on that night, he's like, man, when you came back there and did that, that just took us to an even bigger, higher level than we were. And that was just the cherry on top of just a great night. Everything delivered. Everybody had a great match in the ring. I don't think anybody had a stinker. Usually every card, 1 or 2, you're kind of like, man, that was all right. But that night, everyone just killed it. And then we ended with a controversial ending with the main event. So that was just a great one that everything went off really well. For SCW Pro, I'll reference back to the 20th anniversary show last year.
Great night.
Man, that if you talk about scheduling a match card perfectly, they nailed it from top to bottom. The opening match, the 10-man tag, just set the tone for the whole night.
It was something else, wasn't it?
It was
something else, man.
One of my favorite moments of doing this was after the match when they start playing Living on a Prayer and everybody's singing. My kids have really gotten into Bon Jovi lately because of me. And the fact that they were singing that song and I turned around and all the legends that were there were in the crowd and they're singing it. And right to the left of them are my 5 kids. And I snagged the picture and it was just an amazing moment to see that happen the way it did. And then from then on out, that whole show just, once again, it was one of those nights where you could just tell that everyone that was on that card was just hyped up to another level to just deliver. And it was just amazing. Every match was great from top to bottom. So that was a one for SCW Pro. Madhouse Wrestling's very first show. That was a really good one that sticks out to mind. They had the tournament to determine the first champion, and it was one called Manders, James Jeffries, AJ Smooth, and Jeremy Wyatt. I mean, you can't pick a better 4 to have to determine your first champion. And then
Hell no.
they just killed it. And then you have the crazy tag match between Gabe Galileo and Max Chill against Malice and Ugly at the time, because Justin Decent and Ugly, because Malice couldn't wrestle that night. But that was just another night where they knew they were bringing something to the table, that they were going to kill it that first night. And top to bottom, they did. Everybody just dominated that night. It was just amazing. And then on the flip side of that, when you go to Absolute Pro Wrestling, last year they had their show Super Slam, and it was main evented by a triple threat tag team ladder match. And they crowned their first tag team champions and their open weight champion, which is kind of their mid-card title. They crowned both of those that night. Just another night. There's just certain nights, there's the promotions all have multiple shows throughout the year, but some shows feel like it's just progressing the story to what they're trying to do. It doesn't have that level of excitement. It's still a great show. It just, when they have their big ones, everyone that comes in just knows, all right, we're going to kill it tonight. And they deliver it every time. Impact Pro Wrestling, with Impact Pro Wrestling, the Hall of Fame show is always a standout show. It always has a great turnout, always has great matches. But for me, my personal favorite time with Impact Pro Wrestling was during COVID, and when they were running shows from their training facility, the Vault. And it was literally just wrestlers and a few other wrestlers that were there to help, and maybe some of their family members, and then myself and my kids in just this little room. We had a ring, they had a camera. Just being a part of that was just a cool experience to see how that all kind of shaped out, and how they were doing weekly live shows on Facebook to keep their fans involved. When COVID happened, wrestling promotions either shut down entirely or found a way to provide their fans with some kind of experience. And Impact Pro Wrestling did that. And Troy Peterson was more than willing to let me come there and take pictures to help continue to build their brand and everything. So those would be the 5 that I've been a part of that probably stick out the most, if I think about it.
Is the picture taking just that much easier on those nights, or it just comes to you?
Those nights it does, just because everything just feels bigger, and it usually, when they're all in their zone and I'm taking the first couple matches, if I get a good shot, that puts me in okay, let's do this. And to reference that, the Prestige Rumble earlier this year, SCW Pro, Manders versus Cornboy, I took a picture of Manders coming out, walking out into the BGC Center, and I looked at it on my camera and I said, okay, it's one of those nights. It's all already. And they went out and they had probably match of the year so far that I've seen personally. I mean, those two just killed it that night.
I would agree. That was a great match.
And then from there, it just smooth sailing, and everybody was just on top of their game like another level. So, yep, you can feel it those nights for sure.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick time out, I believe, here. We're getting close to the half-hour mark, so we're going to pay some dues to our sponsors. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk more wrestling with our guest, Clint. We'll also have our newest segment from our good friend, the feline phenom, JT Energy. We'll take a moment to just focus. Well, all that right after the break here. Stay tuned. We'll see you on the other side.
Football season may be over, but for frequency's sake still has you covered for all your sporting needs. Tune in every Sunday when the best professional wrestling podcast around, Cards Subject to Change, gets you caught up on everything inside the ropes. They won't miss a count with weekly analysis and interviews. More into auto racing? We've got a double dose for you on the track. Tune in to Fast Money with Rod Villagomez each week and win some money with the quickest bets in all of sports. Want more insight from Pit Row? Check out the Green, White, and Checkered podcast, where they give their insight on everything happening on and off the track. Need your basketball fix? Points in the Paint has you covered, with live shows every other week looking at everything in the association. Backed by popular demand, we have the return of The Payoff Pitch, FFSQC's baseball show, covering you on news around the MLB. If you're missing football, don't fret. Mark and Dan still have you covered in the football lounge. Missing Joe Winkle? Probably not, but he's still here talking sports on Educated Ignorance. Football season might be over, but we've still got you covered. For frequency's sake, you know what we mean.
For Frequency's Sake is brought to you by Durham Remodeling, serving the Quad City area's remodeling and repair needs since 1973. Clint's Draft House, grab a bite and a pint. 7th Street, Moline. Lopez, New York-style pizza served up by the slice or pie, Davenport. Lifted Energy, energy drinks, coffee, donuts, and more, #GetLifted. Atomic Sports Cards and Collectibles. Sports cards and memorabilia, vintage clothing, hats, pennants, and more. Ryan Allison Tattoo. Step into the vibrant world of tattoos with Ryan Allison. And A Cut Above, offering quality custom woodwork designed specifically around our customers.
Welcome back to Cards Subject to Change.
Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back to the show. We are powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. I am one half of your tag team champions on the For Frequency Sake Podcast Network, the Wizard CZ. My partner on this corner, never wrong, Nick Bull. We are joined by Tag Team Photography's Clint Dye. But before we get back into talking with Clint, we're going to take a moment of focus.
Hello. Week 4 of A Moment of Focus with the feline phenom, JT Energy. And this week, focus. Isn't that such a great word to focus on alongside the Card Subject to Change podcast and Clint Dye, aka Tag Team Photography. In this world, a lot can be put in front of us. But until you really adjust that focus, do you see it clearly? Does it make sense? Those things that don't make sense to you, give it a second. Maybe check the focus and reassess what will actually change your life if you look at it differently. Maybe through a different lens, we might say. This has been A Moment of Focus with the feline phenom, JT Energy.
And how ironic we talk about focus, and we've got a guy who's focusing the whole show, Clint Dye, when he's working and taking pictures for Tag Team Photography. Clint, I want you to take us through your match night routine, what you do when you show up to an event and what you're looking for, how you're getting set up, because you are constantly moving once the show starts. You're like a first person shooter game. You've got more than one camera on you. You got them side slung everywhere. Talk about what your routine is when you show up to the venue and how you get set up for the show and get ready for the night's action.
Well, the biggest thing for me when we first get there is getting my kids situated.
Yes.
I have 5 kids, so and they all come, to the shows, and they range from 13 to 5 years old. So wide range of age that I'm dealing with, but they've been going so long now that they just they know what they're doing. I don't have to worry about them getting in trouble. There's a few times I might have to calm them down for whatever they're doing before the show starts, basically. But when I first started doing this, it was my son Emmett who would go to all the shows with me. But over time, his brothers and sister eventually wanted to come too. So I told even his older brother, I said, just follow Emmett's lead because he's used to doing this now. So getting them situated, where they're going to sit, where we're going to put them for the night, making sure they got their snacks if they need them and everything to go from there. Make sure they're entertained because we're usually there about an hour and a half before the show starts. Make sure they're entertained for that hour and a half. And then depending on the venue, if it's somewhere I've never been before, I'll test my camera to see, what setting I want to set it on, just to see what the lights are going to be like and how it's going to turn out. If it's a big show, a lot of the times I'll bring my promo pics set up where I'll find a spot in the locker room and I'll set up my lights and I'll take promo pics. Like I've done that a few times at the Bluegrass Community Center. They have a great little brick wall down in the basement there that I'm able to set my lights up and take pictures there. Once I get set up there, I'll chit chat with the wrestlers, talk to them, talk to promoters, ask if there's anything specific that they're looking for, for promotion wise coming out of that show that they want to make sure I get a good shot of. A lot of the times, depending on the show, I'll know the results of the card that are coming. Sometimes I like to know that. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I like just to be in the moment, sports photography, just be there, capture the moment as it happens. But sometimes if I know something's coming, I know to be sure I'm in the right spot to get it, And so talk to the promoter, talk to the wrestlers, see if there's anything that they're wanting a shot of. For an example on that, it was a Madhouse Wrestling show. They were putting their Extreme Grand Prix Championship on the line, and it was going to be a fatal four-way match. And Arun Singh and Nick Nolan were going to be probably the last two left. And they had a moment that they wanted to catch on picture. And so they told me what they're planning. And I was like, okay, I know where I need to be. And it was like a submission hold with the guy reaching, and we had the belt laid out in front of me, and I was shooting from the belt's perspective.
Oh yeah.
He's reaching for it, and it just worked out really well. And that was just me collaborating with them before their match about, hey, we're thinking of doing this. Let's see what we can get figured out. So, and then once I talked to a few of the wrestlers, catch up with a few guys, I hadn't seen in a while, see how everybody's doing. I'll go out and take pictures of the fans, coming in, get some shots of the place where the show's taking place. Wrestlers are selling merch. I like to get pictures of them interacting with fans as they're selling their merchandise and things like that. And then just check on the kids one more time before the show starts, and then get where I need to be for the first match and go from there.
Clint, let me ask you, I see you walking around ringside with multiple cameras. Talk about what you're doing with each camera, the difference between when you're using one or the other. What are you looking for? What are you seeing through those lenses?
One of them, the one around my neck, always is my wide angle lens. So it's one where if I want to get like the crowd in the background of like a cool shot of a stare down or something, or if they're coming off the top turnbuckle and I want the whole perspective, I'll use that one. And then my other one is just a regular lens. And I really like to use that one during submission holds because I can get closer with that lens than the wide angle. Like the wide angle is cool because I can get the crowd in the background and get the full shot of the submission attempt. But if I have my regular lens, I can zoom in a little more and get more facial expressions and things like that. So that's the two big differences between my cameras. I have a wide angle that gets everything in perspective. I like to do a lot of shots of the full crowd to get to show what the mass size of the crowd is there. And then the ones a little closer to get a little more intimate pictures as they're wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. I love, one of the things I love with your photography is entrance photos. You have some great angles. Like I've never been to a show at Wildwood. I mean, I'm going to talk about SCW because that's my wheelhouse. I've been to an Impact Pro show. I've been to an Absolute Pro show, but SCW is our backyard. The shots at Wildwood coming down the stairs just are awesome. How do you decide though, whether you're going to be like, you have a lot of shots from in front of the people as they're coming out, a lot of from behind. How do you decide what looks best, what you want to see is when the wrestlers are making their way into the ring?
At Wildwood, when they're coming, that staircase is so unique. It's such a unique entrance way that they come from when they come down there. And the first one that really sticks to mind was one of JT Energy at one of their shows right around Halloween when he was dressed up like Jack Skellington, basically. And he came out to This Is Halloween by Marilyn Manson. And my kids love that movie. And so when they heard that, they lost their mind that he was coming after that. And then he was made up like that. But as I'm sitting there at the bottom of the staircase and he turns the corner, he saw me there and he stopped and he took it in for a minute. He made sure that he waited. He waited for me to basically move back and let him know that, hey, okay, I got the shot. And then when I was editing it, the color that comes from those fluorescent lights and everything, it just makes for a cool picture. And that's probably one of my favorite Wildwood pictures that I've ever taken. He actually made it into a baseball card and he had it put on shoes, and it was just a cool experience. As for like when I'm behind him at the BGCC and Bluegrass, I like that one because you see the back of the wrestler and you see the fans. I try to shoot I hold my camera above them and I shoot down with my wide angle, so I'm getting them in the center, but the fans are there too. And so you can see fans booing or you can see fans cheering. One of my favorites from that kind of angle was the night that they were the 20th anniversary show when they were honoring Latin Thunder. And I got the shot of the back of Latin Thunder's mask, and right to the right of him is my son with a "Thank You Thunder" sign. And I was like, you couldn't have planned that any more perfect, that he's right there as Thunder's, shaking hands with other fans. And it's just a cool perspective that I found out one of the first shows that I shot there. I did that, and I was like, okay, that looks pretty cool. I think I will stick with that. That'll be my kind of, marquee shot for the bluegrass shows there, to do that. And then just other shows, CEW, when we do Bridge City Slam, we got the long walkway, the old school WCW long stage walk, and that, because once we got the curtain with the CEW logo, it made it even more special, I think, because they stand in front of that logo when they come out and then they walk. So I get them coming out facing me, and then I get them walking the long walk to the ring and having that perspective of the fans to the bottom below, them walking on the stage, and then the ring and the rest of the crowd. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool, So just depends on the venue and what I can kind of see and how it might look with the fans and everything like that. So
I'm going to piggyback off Heather Wood's comment here. She put, Clint's pictures are awesome. If I can't make a show, I always look forward to his pictures on my news feeds. That's true. You can usually gauge the results of a show or gauge a show and how it went by seeing your news feeds and stuff. And other, I love when you're at an SCW show. Hey, am I in any of those background of those pictures? What did I miss? What did I miss that I didn't see from my seat? And then I love when you show the other promotions, like, hey, I'm getting to see other wrestlers I wouldn't see. It's kind of like old school when you go to Hy-Vee and you'd sit there and flip through a magazine at the news stand. Except it's just on Facebook now. We're flipping through and seeing your pictures on newsfeed. I love seeing your pictures on those news feeds as well.
Thank you. And what I try to do is the day after every show, I try to have at least 2 or 3 of each match, just to get them right out there right afterwards. Even sometimes I will upload pictures to my phone before I leave a promote, like where the show's taking place. If something big happens, I want to make sure I get something out there right away. If there's a title change, I want to be able to put that. So I'll upload a couple to my phone, do a quick edit, and then put them on the socials. But every show, I want to get at least 2 or 3 of each match, just to say, hey, the albums are coming this week, and then I want to have them all done and published before the week is over, as the promotions move on to their next show. So
for sure. Clint, let's kind of take a sidestep here. We've been talking a lot about your work. I want to talk a little bit about your fandom now. I know we talked how you got into the business, or how you got into wrestling, I should say, watching and all that. But what are you watching now? What grabs your attention other than those independent shows that you're at, taking pictures in the wrestling world right now?
I mean, I watch WWE. Being at home with 5 kids, the schedule is pretty hectic. So my wrestling watching happens a lot of times after the fact with the bigger promotions, following on Twitter or X or whatever it is. Social media, I'll see a lot of videos there. I used to watch Raw every Monday night. Now it's kind of hit or miss because of baseball or whatever sporting events going on that my kids are in. We're always doing stuff like that. So I stay up with it through social media. I haven't watched a whole lot of AEW, just never really got into it, but I follow somewhat on social media. So I keep up a little bit with what they're doing. Same with TNA and some of the other bigger promotions out there, but mainly just WWE. My kids, they're big into WWE. They really like NXT. They're big NXT fans, so they watch that quite a bit. For me, though, it's when I can watch it. We'll watch the pay-per-views when they're on. The boys and I will watch them. My daughter sometimes will watch them with us, but we make sure to watch those. But as for the weekly shows, it's just kind of staying up as I can and watch when I can. So
I know you grabbed Nick's attention when you said your kids are watching NXT. That's where he butters his bread right now.
I love NXT. I go out of my way to watch NXT. I'd rather watch NXT over Raw and SmackDown. There's just something about it I love. I can't pinpoint it. It's got the perfect mix of youth and veterans on there. I love what they're doing with that show right now.
Yeah, my kids all love it too.
Excuse me. Ooh.
Bless you.
We are. Thank you. If you're just tuning in here, this is the Card Subject to Change podcast. We appreciate you joining us here. If you're watching live or if you're listening after the fact, we're powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoos. We're here with Tag Team Photography's Clint Dye, talking all things wrestling. Clint, talk about my brain just went blank. Help me, Nick. You got to ask a question, Nick.
Clint, how long you talk about, wrestlers, it takes them a while to come down after a show. How long does it take you to come down after a show? It's intense.
Mm-hmm.
You're moving around for the better part of 2 hours, constantly taking pictures, trying to capture the moment. How long does it take you to come down after a show? Because I know as a fan, sometimes it takes me to come down and I didn't do a dang thing but sit there and cheer and have a good time.
For me, the big come down time is after the show when we get home, and the kids will usually, depending on how long the drive is, the kids will probably fall asleep on the way home.
Yep.
They'll go to bed. My wife's usually asleep by the time we get home, so then I will stay up pretty late, do some late night edits, and that's when it just all kind of, I'm looking at pictures, just reminiscing everything. And then the next day I'm ready to post some of those edits and go from there and do the housework that needs to be done or whatever we've got planned for the day as a family and post as I go throughout the day. That's why I like to have a few edits after each show. So that Sunday or Saturday, whichever day is after the show, I have some stuff to put out there for the promotion too. So usually that time when we get home and I'm just chilling out by myself, put a movie on and start editing pictures.
Yeah.
What do you look for when you go back and you're editing your pictures? What do you look for to pick what you're going to post on social media? And what do you do? What does your editing process look like?
I really like to look for, some action shots. Obviously, everybody loves a good action shot. But for me, the ones that I enjoy the most are the emotional shots. Somebody's just won the championship and they're losing their mind. I want to get that shot. I want to get the fans interacting with the wrestlers, whether they're booing a wrestler's face or, cheering them. One of the things that I always used to love when we were doing a lot of the IPW shows is Adam Love would always get in my son Emmett's face, and and Emmett would be giving him a hard time and they would just be going at it. So I'd always want to try and get that picture. If any wrestler goes up to my kids because they know them during the show, I want to get that shot just because it's something I know they're going to remember. And my wife always gets a kick out of that too. She knows my kids love going to these shows. So getting those emotional shots and just those moments that I want to just categorize them as iconic to the promotion. If you get an image that promotion can remember, for as long as it's around, that's when I feel like I've accomplished something. I feel like, okay, this is something that's going to be part of their lore and their history, until the promotion shuts down. And even then people will still kind of remember it. So if I can capture a few of those, each show I'm at, I really want to go to and try and give everybody something to remember after seeing the show and everything like that. So, but action shots are just as cool to catch too, because those are the ones where you're like, oh, I really got that picture. So it's kind of cool.
Our good friend Striker.
Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead, CZ.
I was just going to say, our good friend Striker chiming in. You talk about the memories. Memories last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do. And you're in a unique role, Clint. You're kind of like the memory portal.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking these pictures for people to look back on and remember. It's a very important and interesting role. I mean, a wrestling photographer is something you really don't, isn't publicized much. You don't talk about much, but man, everybody loves those pictures when they're posted. So you're kind of like the portal to memories.
Well, and it's always cool to me when a wrestler, and I'll share a picture, by itself. There's certain pictures that I feel just need to be shared by themselves. They don't need to be in an album. That's just a moment that you're like, okay, this is a pretty big deal. Let me share it on its own. And one of the biggest things for me is when a wrestler gives me a compliment of a picture that they really liked, or they ask if I can email them the picture so they can print it off to sell to fans. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that for you. No problem at all. Just creating the memories for the wrestlers and the fans and the promotions. It's a cool deal that I'm super proud to be a part of and just love doing.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. I kind of did it last week before the show to kind of hype up the show, but talk about some of your favorite pictures that you've taken and why they end up on your favorite list.
A few that jump out to mind, Merrick Brave and JT Energy staring each other down at Epic Night 2 in 2022, right before their Iowa Championship match. I made it in black and white. My wife likes to give me a hard time because I do a lot of black and white pictures. I just think wrestling pictures look really cool in black and white. Some of them look better in black and white than they do in color. And that was just one of those moments where they were taking it all in and they were just staring each other down. And it was just a cool moment to see that develop. And once I took it, I was like, yep, that's going to be one that I remember for a long time. I took one of Storm Thomas at a CEW show here in Oskaloosa where he's just flexing. And if you know Storm Thomas, he's absolutely jacked to the gills, he's ripped. And I took it and I was like, oh, that's another keeper, And so then when Bridge City Slam came up after that, Austin Bayless and I got it made into a canvas for him, pretty good size canvas. And he now has that hanging in his home gym at home. And
that's cool.
He didn't know we were doing it. And during the Fan Fest, Jeff Alexander will interview the wrestlers throughout the Fan Fest part of it. And he interviewed Storm, and Storm he got a little emotional seeing the picture because he didn't know we were doing it. So to see him have that reaction was just a cool moment to see happen. Other pictures that come to mind, trying to think. Referencing back to the Absolute Pro Wrestling Super Slam and the crowning of their tag team champions, I got a picture of Brandon the Shank Eubanks and Bryce Jordan on top of the ladder. Bryce is holding the belt with one hand and Shank's kind of leaning into him and he's got his arm around him on the other hand. And it's just cool to see those two who I've seen them when they were in IPW, just getting kind of started and everything like that. But to see them come together and knowing their friendship and what they were trying to do was just a cool moment capturing that. And then I tell you, when they pulled those titles down, it was in Waterloo and they're both from the Waterloo area. That's probably arguably one of the loudest reactions I've heard at all the shows I've been to. That crowd absolutely lost their mind when they won the tag titles. And then just for me to get a picture of them, capturing that moment for what it was just really cool. So those are three that I can think of off the top of my head.
Awesome.
Clint, talk about the coming weeks. Where can tag team photography be found at? What shows will you be attending here in the next few weeks? We talked about March and April being full of shows in Iowa. Where can we see you doing your work and enjoying wrestling at?
In April, let's see. Next week, I won't be at any shows, unfortunately. My daughter has state gymnastics in Bettendorf at the same time as both Madhouse and Absolute Pro, so won't be there next week. But I think the following week is WrestleMania, so nobody really does shows that weekend. Just try not to compete with that. And then middle of April, SCW Pro has their last Wildwood show before Epic, so I plan to be there. And then they have Epic, obviously, at the end of the month. On the 27th of April, I'll be there for sure for that one. Absolute Pro Wrestling has a show on April 20th in Algona, and they have a triple threat ladder match for not only the tag titles, but also their heavyweight championship. So all the gold's on the line in a six-man tag team ladder match. So I'll be there for that one. May 4th, CEW is back here in Oskaloosa. And then I know May 18th, SCW is going to have that fundraiser show that they're going to be putting on at Bluegrass. So I plan to be on there too. So that's pretty much April and May, kind of how it kind of pans out. So,
well, you mentioned WrestleMania in there, Clint. As a wrestling fan, what are you looking forward to most from WrestleMania 40 this year? The card's starting to come together. The stars are starting to align. What's got you interested with WrestleMania this year?
Part of me knows that they're going to do it, but Cody finishing the story. I have a buddy who's in a wrestling page with me who just hates them talking about the story. He wants the story to be finished just so we can move on and we don't have to. So, they could go either way with it. Roman could continue the reign until he breaks Hogan's record or whatever, or Cody could finish the story. Either way, I think it works with what they're doing right now. So I think that would probably be the big one. Obviously, Gunther versus Sami Zayn is the one match that I'm really interested to see, because the way they've been building this story arc for Sami, you feel like something big's coming to cap it off. And if you're going to put the title on Cody, you're going to need people for him to fight. Well, maybe it's time for Gunther to move up and that would be the way to start that. So those are the two big things for me right now.
That makes two of us. I'm really looking forward to that Gunther Sammy match. I think it's going to steal the show, whatever night it's on. Those two are going to go out there and just absolutely kill it, I think.
Yep. And also, you want to see if The Rock can have a match without hurting himself. So,
oh yes,
I mean, it's an obvious concern. They have to have it. His managers and his PR people are like, all right, do what you want to do, but don't hurt yourself again.
Yeah, no kidding. Back
Clint,
WrestleMania 28 or 29 when he tore his hip flexor during the G.I. Joe movies, and they all got upset with that. I remember that.
Yep.
Clint, I know you are all over social media. Tell us where we can find your photography online. Where can we see those great pictures?
Tag Team and Instagram, it's Tag Team Photography. And then on Twitter or X, it's just at CDye56. But I have my Tag Team Photography in my little headline about who I am and everything like that. I had a Tag Team Photography Twitter account, but it was just, I had already established so much with my personal one. I was like, I don't want to build another one when I already have this one. So I just keep it there. And that's where I do a lot of my football stuff too. So.
Well, Clint, I want to thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking wrestling with you, as I'm sure Nick has.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna wrap things up for the night. Before we go, I do want to give you a little bit of a preview. Next week, we're still kind of working things out as to what we're gonna do, but WrestleMania week is going to be big.
Mm-hmm.
We have 4 shows, Nick,
Nice.
in the span of a week.
Yes, we do.
We've got on the 31st of March, we have our WrestleMania weekend preview of the independent scene with our good friend Tim Regal.
Yep.
On April 3rd, we will be doing a panel show with several members of the For Frequency's Sake podcast network as a WrestleMania preview. Saturday, we're doing 2 shows. We're going to do Stand and Deliver on its own because we like to treat NXT as its own thing and give it its own flowers. And then we'll be an instant reaction of night 1 of WrestleMania Saturday night.
Nice. And
then on Tuesday of the following week, we will review night 2 and the Raw after Mania. A lot of big things coming WrestleMania week. We've got a big April coming up as well. Stay tuned on socials. We'll be posting some previews here in the next few days as to what's coming up in the next month or so. But Nick, do you have anything else to add? Anything you want to touch on before we say goodnight?
No, I just want to thank Clint for coming on here and talking shop with us about wrestling, taking pictures of wrestling events and whatnot. Most importantly, Clint, we know you're a wrestling fan and it shows in your work, and we love seeing your pictures come up. I really do, really appreciate them. If you're a wrestling fan, this is the most wonderful time of the year, whether you like the WWE or not. WrestleMania is so much more than just WWE. It means more independent shows during that weekend. There's something for everybody that weekend of WrestleMania, if you're not the biggest WWE fan. So it really is the most wonderful time of the year if you're a wrestling fan, and we're glad that you're going to be here along for the ride, watching. We coming at 4 shows WrestleMania week. We are getting ready. We did a bunch of show prep earlier today, CZ, for WrestleMania week. So we got all of our show prep, getting our show prep out of the way so we can give you the best shows possible during that week, that busy time. We're looking forward to it, and we're happy that you're along for the ride.
All right. It has been a great night here. Sorry, I'm delirious. We're going to wrap things up. I've gone off the rails. Thank you for tuning in to Card Subject to Change. We'll see you right here next Sunday. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.